My name's Emily, and I want to give you a couple of tips for starting improvisation, or maybe improving your improvisation and taking it further if you've already started. So the first one is about how much material to use. I find that when I was first learning, I tended to use way too much material and too many ideas. I'd come up with one idea and then play that for a second and then move on to another idea, And for me, this came from a place of insecurity and imposter syndrome. I worried that I was going to run out of ideas, and so I'd deal with that by just forcing myself to come up with stuff constantly. And listening back, I realized, actually, like, this one little melody, or this one little figure or idea, like, if I just stayed with that, I could have made a whole piece out of that. It would have sounded really good. But instead, I moved on to other things, and it just wound up sounding really disjointed. And when other people do it, I don't know if it comes from the same place, but I definitely hear that a lot. And even now that I'm on the lookout for that, I still find that I do it from time to time. I listen back to performances where I feel like I stayed with something for a while, and I feel like, I could have actually worked with this for much longer, and that would have been really interesting. And I also find there's a tendency to, I notice this myself and other players, to defaulting to trying to solo a lot. And I got that feedback from a teacher once, and I see other people doing it now. And if you're in a group situation and everyone's trying to solo at once, it sounds terrible. It turns into a shouting match. Don't do it. Really listen to what's going on. And this might also mean that you accompany sometimes. This might mean that you don't play sometimes. I really think everybody should try to make a general rule of making sure in a group improv situation that they're not playing sometimes. I find a lot of people do tend to lean on, instead of not playing, when they feel a bit uninspired, they just noodle on something that they know they can do. And that sounds okay, but it really just winds up sounding kind of boring, and it would have been better if instead more space was made for other players who were working on something a bit more thoughtful. So really, this is all less is more, and I think that's really important, because we all tend to think more is more. But actually, it's better to work with less, to be more thoughtful with a smaller amount of material, and to leave more space. And the other thing I wanted to say is that if you're somebody who improvises on an instrument that you're really practiced on, which I am, and most of you probably are, that can get in the way of really coming up with some good stuff sometimes. And I've seen some people deal with this by improvising on an instrument that they aren't practiced on. So they might play one instrument and then and play written music on that and practice on that, and then play improvisation on a completely different instrument. And that's one way of doing it. It works really well. It can be quite cool. Even if you don't want to perform that way, generally, I recommend trying it every now and then, because it's a good exercise. But the other thing you can do is make your instrument make a sound that you know you won't be able to predict what's coming out. So do something wrong. So on bass clarinet, I would make a fingering that I know is an incorrect fingering, and a weird sound is going to come out. And then, so something like, so they give me a couple of different tones to work with that I can play with using voicing and getting different harmonics. And so for that, I put down a lot of fingers and then lifted one up towards the top, and then it just gave me a bit of a strange sound that I can play with. And wasn't able to entirely predict what was going to come out of the instrument in that moment. And that's also a good way to get around the predictability, because I think in improvisation sometimes the best things happen when we don't know what's happening and we're taking risks. So those are a couple of my tips, and you should try them out.